Commanding the Horde by Ganymede Jones. Vespera closed her eyes, reaching deep within herself to the well of necromantic power that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. As she extended her senses into the earth beneath her feet, she felt a tingling sensation that began in her fingertips and spread up her arms, like the caress of 1,000 icy needles. The ground seemed to pulse with a sickly green energy that only she could perceive, guiding her to the remains of the dead that lay buried in the soil. With a twist of her will, Vespera summoned the corpses to rise, and the earth began to churn and shift as though awakening from a long slumber. One by one, the bodies of the fallen clawed their way to the surface, their forms grotesque and misshapen from the ravages of decay. Some were little more than skeletons held together by scraps of leathery skin and desiccated sinew, while others were bloated and swollen with the gases of decomposition, their flesh mottled and grey. As the 5 corpses shambled to their feet, Vespera could feel the icy tendrils of her power entwining with their lifeless forms, animating them with a semblance of purpose. A pang of guilt struck her heart. These were once people with lives and families, but she had no choice. The memory of Holston's sacrifice and Leora's capture fueled her determination. She had to protect Pine Mill, no matter the cost. Through the bond that now connected them, she could sense their eagerness to serve, their hunger for the flesh of the living that even death could not extinguish. "Go for the legs," she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she focused her will. The corpses responded instantly, their movements eerily synchronized. With a silent command, Vespera directed the horde towards the ogre, watching as they surged forward in a lurching, relentless tide. The ogre, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the undead, let out a bellow of rage and swung its massive club in a wide arc, sending one of the corpses flying through the air in a shower of splintered bone. But even as the first corpse fell, the others continued their advance, their movements synchronized as though guided by a single overriding purpose. They swarmed around the ogre's legs, clawing and biting at its tough hide with a ferocity that belied their decaying forms. The ogre stomped and thrashed, its massive feet crushing the skulls of the corpses like overripe fruit. But still they came on, heedless of their own destruction. Through the haze of battle, Vespera could feel the ebb and flow of the horde's movements, could sense the damage they were inflicting on the ogre, even as they suffered losses of their own. With each corpse that fell, she poured more of her power into the remaining attackers, infusing them with an unnatural strength and speed that allowed them to dodge the ogre's increasingly desperate attacks. The cold, empty ache spread from her bones as the battle raged on. As the ogre began to tire, its movements growing sluggish and uncoordinated, Vespera saw her chance. "Now the throat," she commanded silently, feeling the surge of power as they leaped at the ogre's vulnerable neck. With a final, surging effort, she directed the remaining corpses to concentrate their attack on the ogre's throat, watching as they leaped and clawed their way up its massive frame like a pack of feral dogs. The ogre let out a gurgling scream as the corpses tore into its flesh, their teeth and fingernails ripping through skin and muscle with a sickening wet sound. It staggered backwards, its hands scrabbling uselessly at its ruined throat, before finally toppling to the ground with an earth-shaking thud. As the echoes of the battle faded away, Vespera released her hold on the remaining corpses, watching as they crumpled to the ground like marionettes with their strings cut. She could feel the toll that the summoning had taken on her body and mind, could sense the cold, empty ache that seemed to emanate from her very bones. But even as she struggled to catch her breath, Vespera knew that this was only the beginning. With each new battle, each new victory, she would grow stronger, more adept at wielding the power of the dead. And one day, she knew, she would be ready to face the true architects of her suffering, to visit upon them the same horrors that they had inflicted upon her and her people.